I read 100 books this year, so statistically, some of them were bound to be good. Don't mind my massive water jug. I have a condition. Hello, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Today, I am taking you through all of the best books that I read in 2022. Last time, I was a hater, told you all of my least favorite books of last year, and it was a very cathartic moment for me to vent about these books that I hated, that so many others truly loved. And today I'm going to tell you about all the books I truly loved that everybody else hated. No, just kidding. Most of them are pretty popular, I would say. Like a list of my favorites and then some honorable mentions, but they're all kind of my favorites, and there's really no organization to this video because I thought of a million different ways to organize it and all of them didn't work right. So I'm just gonna talk about the books that I really liked last year. These are in no particular order unless I say that they are. Like my favorite one is my favorite one. Most of the rest of them are like, they were all good. But some of them I like more than the other ones. We're just gonna try our best. Dreamwork by Mary Oliver. Oh my God, Mary Oliver. She is one of my favorite poets of all time, and this collection was so lovely. I read Blue Horses last year, really loved it, but I liked this collection even more. This felt a little bit more quintessentially. It had more of her famous poems, her well-known work, and more of the themes that she's like really known for. So I think if you're interested in Mary Oliver, this is a really great place to start. You can see that I dog-eared so many of these poems because I just want to be able to return to them very quickly. And truly, I read this and I read Upstream essays of hers, solidified as one of my favorite writers of all time. If you don't know, Mary Oliver is really well known for her nature imagery and for poetry that emphasizes a connection to nature, that emphasizes a connectedness to the world around us beyond individuality. It is just so beautiful. And to me, it's very uniquely woman. It's not that men can't read it and love it. It's just that so much of what she says to me feels connected to how I identify as a woman. And so in my mind, she's a very woman-centered author. Womanhood plays a role in her work. Also, she's queer. All of these things together, put them in a little cocktail and you have a delicious Aperol Spritz that your friends are all jealous of. I'm literally trying to do this fast because I really liked a lot of books last year. I had a really good reading year, so I gotta get through some of these, you know what I mean? Okay, next up. Hamnet. I was filming myself when I read the last 10 pages of this book for a vlog. Wish I hadn't. I wish I hadn't.
You know what it never was? That's serious.
I was bawling so hard. The concept of this book, if you don't already know, is the author's imagining of what might have been going on in William Shakespeare's family while he was off in London writing plays and his wife and children were stuck in Stratford. She paints this incredible portrait of a family that is dealing with so much, including a mostly absent father, the bubonic plague. To me, it's just such a cool imagining of what was going on behind the world's most famous writer. Who were the people that made it possible for him to be William Shakespeare? And it's so beautifully written. The language is arresting and so powerful. This will be a book that I read over and over in my life. Siblinghood, motherhood, mental illness, so many of these things I think are looked at so beautifully and subtly in a way that doesn't feel like the author's sort of punching you in the face with a moral. It's just true. It's just what these people are dealing with. This is incredible. You should read it. Next on my stack is Crying in H Mart. This is Michelle Zauner's memoir about the year that her mother was dying and died, and her experience sort of becoming a caretaker for her mother, but also her experience grieving her mother once she has died. This book is so deserving of all of the hype that it has. This book made me cry like 7 times, I think. It would just have sentences that would just punch you in the gut. To me, it's one of the truest and most in-depth, helpful portrayals of grief I've seen in literature, because it felt like Michelle Zauner refused to shy away from some of the hard parts of grief, the parts of grief that we don't like to talk about. She also tells this incredible story about hers and her mother's relationship through food. She uses the Korean food that her mom made for her when she was growing up to connect with her mother again in her mother's sort of last months. It really showed how food is our life's blood. Obviously, we need food to survive. I'm not making waves with that statement, but food doesn't just nourish our bodies, it nourishes our souls, and it becomes a point of connection. Michelle Zauner just really captures it. And if you don't know, Michelle Zauner is Japanese Breakfast, the musical artist. It's just so candid and blunt, but beautifully told. And what she does with this book, I think, is no small task. I highly recommend it, but definitely be aware of the content. The audiobook is great. Michelle Zauner reads her own audiobook, and the audiobook is really fantastic. This, for me, was the year I started to like romance. It took me a while to figure out what I look for in romance books, but I think I'm figuring it out. The genre of romance was unlocked to me because of Emily Henry. I read Beach Read a few years ago. I didn't like it that much. Like, I thought it was fine. Then I read People We Meet on Vacation. Okay, wait, I'll put that one here. And I loved it so much. Alex and Poppy live up here rent free. Like, I think about them all the time. That book I read so fast. I mean, kept me on my toes, kept me curious, kept me compelled to the very last page. And it was so cute. It was a friends to lovers. And if there's one thing about me, it's that I love a friends to lovers. And it's about these two best friends who go on vacation together every single year until they don't because something happens. And you don't know while you're reading the book what happened. They decide to go on one last big vacation together. And you get to see glimpses of all of their past vacations in between all the present time chapters. And it's just really fun to kind of put the pieces all together. And you feel like you're traveling all over the world to all these different places that they go. And it's a blast. Later in the year, Book Lovers came out. And this one was also really good. I really think the reason I liked this one so much was because Charlie Lastra reminded me of Roy Kent from Ted Lasso. And like, maybe that's all I need to love a romance book. This one, some people called it enemies to lovers. I don't really, they weren't enemies. They were just like foils to each other a little bit. Like, they met once and were like, I don't really like that person. They weren't like, let me destroy you, like enemies. But I love their two very different personalities and how they work together so well. I think the plot of People We Meet on Vacation is more my speed, but the characters in this one I liked more. It's about Nora, who is an agent in the publishing world, and she's sort of a shark. She's kind of the antithesis to what all of the classic rom-com women are. Just a bad bitch, and she's really good at her job. And Charlie Lastra is an editor. They end up in this small town at the same time. They end up working together on a project, and then they're both hot people. So like, yeah, I really enjoyed those two. And while we're talking about romance, I want to shout out Talia Hibbert's Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I read all three of the Brown Sister trilogy this year, and I liked Chloe Brown and I liked Eve Brown. Okay. Dani Brown, best one of the three. It was so good. So while I'm talking about romance, I want to shout that one out too. I don't own it, but so good. Also Roy Kent energy, and I really think I've pinpointed what I need in a romance novel. Somebody who reminds me of Roy Kent. But Zaf and Dani? Please, sir, could I have some more? Loved them. That's all the romance I'm going to talk about. The first book we read for my book club over on Patreon, $2 a month, super fun community. We read great books most of the time. Linked down below. But the first book that we read was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And holy shit, this blew me away. This book is a memoir about Carmen Maria Machado's time in an abusive lesbian relationship. She tells her story by using lots of tropes from horror literature and folk literature that has horror elements. She creates a haunted house for you, but the haunted house is built with things like gaslighting and things like intimidation. She builds this insane landscape of this relationship and makes you feel trapped inside of it as well. Like, you as the reader understand a small fragment of how a victim would feel in an abusive relationship. I can't express how impressive I think that this book is in just a literary sense, because the things that she does format-wise and narrative-wise in this book are insane. My favorite part of this book was the choose your own adventure section. They take you through different pages, but a lot of them loop back to each other because they're trying to convey to you the cyclical nature of abuse and also trying to convey to you how trapped somebody feels when they don't know the way out. What I did was I tried to just read them straight through because I was like, I don't want to miss any of the pages or anything. But if you do that, Carmen Maria Machado calls you out, and they say in the book, you're just reading the pages all the way through because there's no possible way to get to this page. You're cheating. Go back and start over. It's so cool. This, I can't recommend it enough. I'm so glad that we read it in my book club. Read it in a book club because the discussion that we had about this book, I just read, like second to last book I think I read in 2022 was The Carrying, which is a poetry collection by Ada Limon, who is the poet laureate right now. And like, if you're wondering why, just read this. Wow, I love Ada Limon, and I've been reading her poetry for a long time on the internet, but I've never had a collection of hers that I've like sat down, read straight through. This collection was so incredible. Also, really a testament to Ada Limon and her editors, the way that all of these poems were cohesive together. Like, oh, I appreciated this poem even more because I had read the one before it. And so that I was just super blown away by. It's also pretty accessible poetry. If you're not super into poetry, I think Ada Limon and Mary Oliver are great places to start because they're really accessible. There's just a persistent hopefulness and determination and perseverance that Ada Limon always brings to the table when she writes poetry that makes me have the confidence that I can go on. Some of my favorites in this collection were The Leash, The Vulture and the Body, Notes on the Below, A New National Anthem. You should check her out. I will definitely be reading like all of the rest of her stuff I can get my hands on this year because wow. Buy it. Don't check it out from the library because you're going to want to underline every line. Also loved Real Life by Brandon Taylor. And I don't know if loved is the right word because this book sent me into a deep spiral of sadness and loneliness and depression. But it was so well written. Our main character is in grad school at a Midwestern university. He's studying some sort of biology. He's the only Black person in his program and he's queer in a friend group. His friends kind of suck. He feels very isolated and lonely, and this whole book takes place over like one weekend, and it's just so devastating. There's a lot about trauma, and there's some exploration of how trauma sort of appears again for us later and affects the way that we see the world and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just so good. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, this book was so good, but it's really, really sad. And it's not the kind of sad that like feels good. It's the kind of sad that like feels really awful, but it's a good book. So like you should read it. Okay, next, this year is a year that Allie Smith entered my life with her seasonal quartet. I've read autumn and winter so far because I'm gonna read spring and then summer and summer. This blew me away. This was so lovely. Like, it was such a hopeful, also quiet, contemplative book that just is about the ways in which friends shape our lives, especially unexpected friends, and how we are sort of tethered to the people that have shaped us. The seasonal quartet are all like modern settings in the UK, post-Brexit, dealing with the fallout of Brexit. So far, the two that I've read follow a couple different people and how they're interconnected. They're standalone, so like you don't have to read autumn to read winter and vice versa. But the voice is very much the same and they feel like they go together, both of them, so much. They're very different even though they feel like siblings to me. When I was reading these books, I didn't want to do anything else. They felt like I felt when I read books in like elementary school. Like I felt like I was inside the pages and they were like a blanket, keeping me warm and keeping me safe. I have a review reflection thing about autumn on my Bookstagram, and I'm working on one for winter as well. I just can't wait to read spring and summer this year.
Hi, it's me, but editing me, hence. And I realized that I forgot to talk about 3 books that I really loved this year because I didn't have physical copies. But I just want to shout them out really quickly. Lonely Castle in the Mirror was truly fantastic. I still think about it quite frequently. And it's a great translated work, translated from the Japanese, about children who have been bullied and don't feel like they belong, getting a fantastical place that they do belong. And there's fun like game elements. The characters are really well developed and I loved it so much. I read Braiding Sweetgrass this year, and it's literally one of like my top 5 favorite of the year, and I just loaned out my physical copy and I forgot to talk about it. But Braiding Sweetgrass is a book of essays written by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is an Indigenous author. She weaves together science and Indigenous practice into this just like beautiful, amazing thing that will make you so grateful to live on this planet and will make you look at the earth in a new and much more appreciative way. And I listened to the audiobook, which was great. She narrates it herself, and the way that she writes with such a beautiful connectedness and understanding of the plants and animals and ecosystems around her is incredibly inspiring, and it just was wonderful and one of the best books that I read this year, and you should read it. I think everybody should read it. And then lastly, I want to shout out Brenna Thumler's duology, Sheets and Delicates. These were the graphic novels that really cracked open the graphic novel genre for me and turned me into a graphic novel girly, so they have a very special place in my heart. But in these books, we follow Marjorie is our main character, who is dealing with the loss of her mother and running her family's laundromat after her mother dies, but she's also dealing with middle school. But then we also have our other main character, Wendell, who is a sheet ghost, and the two become unlikely friends. These books are about friendship and grief and love, and they're so beautifully illustrated. Brenna Thumler is incredible. I want her to wallpaper my room. And Delicates, the follow-up, was just as good, if not better, than Sheets, and I can't recommend them enough. They make for the perfect cozy afternoon read, and I just really wanted to shout them out because I'm so grateful that they sort of opened the door for me to loving graphic novels because I can't get enough of them now. Okay, on to my top 3.
The last 3 are like my top 3 favorites. So first up is Beartown by Frederick Backman. It's a book that follows this small town in Sweden. And they're this hockey town, and so all of these high school boys are on the hockey team, and the town really depends on the hockey team for like money and optimism, but also all these boys, like it's their one ticket out of Beartown is to be good at hockey and to like get scouted. This book follows this sort of wide group of teenagers and then a parallel group of adults. You get in-depth looks at so many different characters, and none of them feel underdone. They all feel perfectly well developed and interesting. So masterfully written. The book follows Beartown during the aftermath of a massive incident in the town. I think the last time I cared about characters like this was like when I read like Normal People. I was like weeping over them. Frederick Backman's language and prose and writing and narrative style is like right up my street. I want to read everything that he's written this year. That's the goal for 2023. There's so much discussion about class, power, gender, toxic masculinity, and sports. So much is packed into this book, and it's all dealt with so carefully and truthfully. Also, Benji Ovich has my whole entire heart in his hand, and he can do with it what he likes. At the end of the day, I think this book has so much to say about choices and easy ones versus right ones and silence versus truth, and I just think it's a really impressive book. If you're good with the trigger warnings, I think you should read it. I feel like my thoughts are not eloquent at all about any of these. Next, I have Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. This was my first fiction by Joan Didion. I read The Year of Magical Thinking last year and I liked it, and then this blew me away. This book follows Mariah, our narrator, in the 60s in Hollywood and really picks apart the duplicity of the people in Hollywood while also really focusing on womanhood and what it was like to be a woman in the 60s, and especially a woman in the 60s in the TV and film industry. The way that Joan Didion writes LA and California is so razor sharp, bullseye, perfect. It's one of those books where you don't really like any of the characters. Like none of the characters are really likable. You certainly have people you're rooting for more than others, but none of the characters are without incredible flaws, which I love in a book. I love reading flawed characters, especially flawed characters that I can care about, which is how I felt about Mariah. She doesn't really feel like she has a way out of any parts of her life, so she feels very, very trapped. All of that caged and trapped theme goes back to the patriarchy and how she feels trapped by the patriarchy as a metaphor for like all women. She also uses this really gritty imagery about flesh and pipes and snakes, and all of it just weaves together to create this blinding, gritty, difficult, but really, really compelling picture of a woman's inner life in the 60s, trapped by all of these different men and trapped by her own inability to make a choice. She's a very indecisive, almost Hamlet-like character, where she just finds it impossible to make a choice. And while you're reading it, you're like, please God, do anything. You sort of realize that it's Joan Didion's way of expressing the lack of autonomy and agency that women had at the time. There's also stuff in here about abortion rights. And so I read it right after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and that felt incredibly relevant. It's really, really good. It's really, really good. Okay, my very favorite book of 2022, and perhaps my favorite book of all time, is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. I kid you not, I think about this book multiple times every single day, and I read it last summer. Every single day for the last 6 months, I have thought about this book. This is an essay collection by my favorite spoken word poet, Hanif Abdurraqib, who also writes essays. And in this essay collection, he dives deep into pop culture, into what it's like to be Black in America, into music and sports, just the culture as a whole. And he's able to critique all of these things while also including memoir elements, personal experiences, and stories that give this book such a through line and such a heartbeat that it's just such a visceral thing to read. But because Hanif is a poet, the language is unmatched. Like, it's so beautiful. My favorite essay in this book is Brief Notes on Staying. No one is making their best work when they want to die, as you can see, because I highlighted every line of it, and I think about this essay constantly. Hanif is a self-proclaimed romantic, and it's evident in every line of his book, but not just romantic in terms of a romantic relationship. Romance in terms of life being romantic, music being romantic, culture being something that can be romanticized, and that romanticizing a thing makes it easier to bear. And he's so brilliant. His observations about different things that I've experienced so many times cracked my world open and made them completely new. This book was my favorite of the year. It's one of my favorites of all time. I've been recommending it to everybody that I know, and I'm better for having read it, and I think that you should too. Those are my favorite books of 2022, and I can only hope that this year brings me books that I love as much as the ones that I discovered this year, because this was my best reading year in a long, long time. Please, please, please tell me what your top 3 favorite books of 2022 were in the comments, because I want to know. Can't wait to keep reading this year and keep having you along with me for that ride. And if you want to quite literally read along with me in my book club, where we read 1 book a month and 1 Shakespeare play a month, if you want to, you can subscribe to my Patreon. It only costs $2 a month. There's a great community that comes along with it, and you can participate as much or as little as you want to. But if you want to support my channel without opening your wallet, you can hit subscribe down below, comment and tell me your favorite books of the year, like this video if you liked it, and you can follow me on all the links that will be in the description. Thanks for being here. And in case you haven't heard it today, I love you. Bye.